All right, I think we're about ready to get started. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today to discuss the Genesee Valley Trailtown Grant Program. It's good to join with you all again. I hope you guys all found the Trailtown Summit that we had back in October as enlightening and as valuable as we did. So as has been mentioned by me a few times, and you might have seen mentioned in some other places, PTNY has been awarded funding from the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation to support the creation of trail towns along the Genesee Valley. And we've been thrilled to be working with Nicole and her team, with Christine Uribe at OPRHP. I think Christine's on the line today, with Joan, Carl, Fran, and everybody with the Friends of the Genesee Valley Greenway, and with all of you throughout the past year. It's been great to really learn so much about the Genesee Valley, about the great communities along the Genesee Valley Greenway, and to get to meet some of you. And we're looking forward to what next year brings. As part of the funding for our work, we were given $50,000 for each of 2022 and 2023 to be given out as Genesee Valley Trailtown grants. And I again want to thank the Wilson Foundation for their generous support and really for their vision in seeing what's possible from a Trailtown program in the region. And we're excited to see the range of project proposals that you're all going to come up with and submit to us. So with that, I'm going to jump in. Going to start with a couple of quick housekeeping items as we get started. First, we are recording the webinar, as I mentioned in the emails, that'll be available for folks who weren't able to join us this afternoon. Second, I want to do some quick introductions to the rest of the PTNY team who've joined us today. Many of you will have met Erica and Rebecca from the team before. Erica's helping out with clicking through the slides and some of the technical aspects as well. Rebecca is available for tech support. If you have any issues, feel free to send Rebecca a message in the chat or by email. Rebecca and Erica's emails are both on the screen. And she'll help you as well as she can. In terms of flow, we're going to go through the basics and background information about the grant in the first half of the webinar. If you joined us for the Trailtown Summit back in October and we're in the session that we had, a lot of this will be familiar to you. After that, we'll take a couple of minutes for a short question and answer. And then we're going to get into the more technical aspects of applying for the grant, of using our system. And that's why I've asked my fourth colleague, Jonathan, to join us today. Jonathan Duda is our grants coordinator. He manages the Park and Trail Partnership Grant that the Friends of the Genesee Valley Greenway have received a number of grants from. And he's going to walk through some of the technical steps of getting set up in our grant system. A quick note on questions, and that's if you guys have questions as I'm going along, please put them in the Q&A function down at the bottom. We're going to compile the questions that we receive as part of this webinar and any other questions we receive by email, and we're going to add them to an FAQ section on our website. We've set up a page dedicated to this grant on the PTNY website. I've got the address there. Some of you may have used it to enroll and register for the webinar. But that website is where we'll have these FAQs. We'll have a number of other resources, and it will be where you actually go to apply once the application opens. So next, I'm going to walk through some general guidelines, some eligibility requirements for applicants, what we'll expect from project proposals, application materials, and some additional information we'll expect from eligible applicants. Next, oh, that's not, yep. So what are our grants for? Well, in general, they're for projects that enhance the visitor experience for users of the Genesee Valley Greenway and support the ability of neighboring communities to benefit economically from their proximity to the Greenway. For the communities that have been directly involved in the Trailtown effort, working with Nicole and her team on digital audits and with Michelle on data collection efforts such as the visitor survey, or those of you that have done a bicycle and pedestrian assessment, including the bike rounds that we did back in June, you might already have some good project ideas in mind. The effort should all be spur discussion within your respective communities about what projects you should be pursuing. I'll go into some examples of eligible projects in just a minute or so, but overall, we really want to boost and take advantage of visitation to the Greenway and the other recreational resources in the area. We want to foster placemaking efforts, create safer streets for cyclists and pedestrians, and improve connectivity between Genesee Valley Greenway State Park and neighboring communities. we really see these grants as being a tool to help communities implement the action plans that that Nicole and the Trail Town committees are working on. And I do also want to note that you'll hear me refer to infrastructure for cyclists a lot during this presentation, but the grant isn't necessarily limited to infrastructure for bicycles. Infrastructure that focuses as well on long distance hikers, on equestrian users, on water trail users. These are all eligible under our grant program. Most of our background has been in working with cyclists, so that's sort of ends up being our default, but you know, we really just want to see what proposals will allow the community to best benefit from the potential of being located along the Genesee Valley Greenway. So here are some basics about eligibility for the grant. First, the applicant is going to need to either be one of the municipalities or one of the counties that is participating in the Trail Town initiative. I've listed the 10 Trail Town municipalities there, or a nonprofit organization that works in one of those communities and is focused on implementing a measure that the Trail Town committee is discussing. We are accepting applications from groups that use a fiscal agent or a fiscal sponsor. We'll need to see the MOU between the applicant and the sponsor that formalizes that relationship. But I do encourage the Trail Town communities to talk within your committee and to look at seeing if it's something that the municipality can take on applying. That's I think where we expect to see most of these applications coming from. We'll be giving out $50,000 total, as I mentioned this year. Our minimum award amount is $5,000. The maximum is $15,000. So based on that math, we're going to give out anywhere from 4 to 10 grants in 2022. And a reminder that we're going to be giving out the same amount again in 2023. Now, just a quick aside, I know Nicole and her grant through the NVRC has funding available for communities in Livingston County. We're aware of that funding, and so it's possible that this funding may more of this funding may flow towards some of those other communities. We want to make sure that everyone's able to benefit, but note that all communities within all 4 counties are eligible to apply. We're requiring a 15% match of the total project budget for all of our grants. This can consist of in-kind contributions. It can be things like staff or volunteer time, donated materials, but those contributions will need to be quantifiable and documented. So it's important that applicants keep good records. It can include things like unskilled labor. And those awarded funding will have 1 year from the date we announce the grants to spend the funding. We're going to be giving out 75% of the funding upfront. We'll reimburse the remaining 25% once the project is complete. So moving into some project ideas. What are some of the projects we're going to be looking to fund? We have general ideas. This is just kind of what we've come up with from our internal discussions and from what we've heard from working with the communities over the past number of months. Bike infrastructure is going to be a big thing. Things to help visitors get from the trail into the community, if it's informational signage or kiosks, things that provide them with a feeling of safety and comfort, like bike racks. Placemaking activities such as public art, benches, other street furniture, things that create a welcoming environment for visitors that encourage public gathering, really to help boost pedestrian and cycling traffic to your business areas. We'll also give support for programming or events that highlight or significantly incorporate the Genesee Valley Greenway. Many of you were involved in one of the bike rounds we hosted over the summer, and we've hosted those bike rounds for a number of years now. And while it's a great evaluation tool, it's also just fun. Everybody says whenever they do one of these, it's how fun it is to just get on a bike, just be on a bike. And we host Cycle the Erie Canal as PTNY every summer, and it's a huge hit. We get people that come from around the world to come ride, spend the 8 days riding from Buffalo to Albany. So, that's just something to keep in mind as you're developing your project proposals. Any kind of proposal that identifies creative events and creative programming as a way to boost visitation to your communities could really go a long way to help raising awareness of the GVG and supporting local economies. So we also know that communications and branding and marketing have been a huge component of your work with Nicole. So we're going to welcome those project proposals that assist in spreading communications more broadly. Could be things like graphic design, development or enhancement of a logo, a website, newsletter, or other communication tools. Maybe it's printing and distribution of brochures or other educational or outreach materials, or digital promotion materials. Now, we'd want that all to be consistent with the work that you've been doing with Explore Genesee Valley, with Letchworth Gateway Villages, and all of Nicole's team. But that's definitely an eligible cost that you can apply for funding from this grant for. And finally, if there's anything else that's consistent with the action plans, will positively impact the local community in the Greenway, we recognize that the different trail towns are all in different stages in their development as a trail town. We've got some who are focused on getting people off their bikes and into the local shops. So bike racks might be the most critical, top priority thing. Some places might already have bike racks, but need wayfinding signage to direct people to get them to the downtown area. And we welcome even more creative outside of the box ideas from the trail towns. And I will note that the applications can include more than one discrete project, provided that each project meets all guidelines. We would expect the applicant to describe in the project description, and I'll get into the exact kind of what we're going to be asking for in the grant application in a bit. We're going to be asking applicants to describe how the various projects would complement each other. For instance, if you have a proposal for, I don't know, a kiosk and a monthly event, we'd want to know, like, will the kiosk be a place that people learn about the event? Is there going to be kind of any synergy between the two? And I will note that the $15,000 maximum, that is per trail town community. So, each trail town will be getting no more than 15,000. If that's then spread, we're not going to be giving out 15,000 for one thing and 15,000 for another thing to the same trail town. I do also want to mention the Genesee Valley Greenway State Park Action Plan. Hopefully you've all seen this by now. We have a link available on our website. And this is a document that's been State Parks and Alta Planning did a great job on, just kind of envisioning a future for the Greenway and identifying some steps that need to be taken to get there. I will caution that it does call out a number of projects that don't yet have funding identified for it. And there's some other, it's not like this is the projects identified in this project are going to be happening next year. But one thing that is in the action plan is a lot of helpful information for formulating ideas to fund. There's a crosswalk inventory on page 108. There's a list of standard access plan features on page 114. That includes some suggested materials, some standard site furnishings that are included in the access plan. And we'd want to see that the projects funded with the grant are consistent with those design standards. And we're also going to require that applicants for anything on the Greenway, they need to have sign off and approval from Christine, the State Parks, before doing so. And I'll get into that in the application process section of the webinar. So what's the time frame on the grant going forward? Well, it is pretty quick. We're having the webinar today. The application itself is going to open at the beginning of January, and all materials will be due by the end of February. We're then going to take March and April to review the grants and make the decisions on which projects we're going to be able to be funding, and announce them by May or June at the absolute latest. Our goal is to really have the funding out the door so that the projects can begin this summer. And as I mentioned, you'll have a year to complete the project, and we'll be dispersing the remaining 25% of the funding after that point. And then we'll do it all again a year from now and give out 50,000 more grants. So with that, I'm going to take a short pause, and we're going to get into some Q&A. I see there are some questions in here. First, will winners in 2022 be eligible for applications again in 2023? Yes, I expect that they will. We'll obviously keep in mind that that's something that's occurred already, and we'll have to see exactly, without knowing what applications we receive and how we're going to be awarding the projects, what the split is going to look like for this year. It's hard to know exactly, but yes, and we won't make them ineligible at this point, no. And then I see there's some questions about the town of Leicester. The town of Leicester, I have to would have to confirm with Nicole on that, about if the town of Leicester is a participating trail town municipality. My understanding is that they haven't been, but I would want to confirm with Nicole on that. And then another one about campsites for funding along the GVG. That would be something that we would consider, absolutely. I would, again, caution that anything that would happen on state parks property would need to be discussed with Christine, the state parks manager, before we, before we're able to, award any funding. That would be a discussion that needs to happen. But again, we're open to creative ideas about ways to allow communities to best benefit from the Greenway, and that's sort of if that's what's been identified through your Trail Town process as being the top need. That's definitely something that we, we'd be open to. But again, anything like that, if it's on Greenway property, it will need to be discussed with Christine, the state park manager. Any other questions? If you can feel free to put them in the chat, or there's a raise hand function. We might be able to take some. I see there's another one. Would restrooms be fundable? Yes, restrooms, again, subject to the amounts available. We have the $15,000 maximum. I think depending on exactly what the project entails, restrooms would be fundable. I will also mention that we are open to having this grant serve as, matching funds towards a larger grant. For instance, if you're applying from another source, we would be open to that being the case. But yeah, restrooms would definitely be fundable. And I see Nicole put some clarification on the town of Leicester in the chat, so feel free to look at that, Bill. So I'll take another minute or so if anybody else has any questions, but otherwise I think we're just about ready to move on and kick it over to John. And see one more in the Q&A. Bike rental stations. Again, we'd have to talk through that. Oh, Carl says, oh, Nicole, there's been some information that's been put in the chat that's only been visible to hosts and panelists. So I'll read that out. And then I'll come back to the bike rental stations. Nicole had put a message in the chat. The NBRC funding is non-competitive for the Livingston County trail towns. It's not going to require an application process. And so the funding that is going to be allocated will be based on what priorities emerge from the action plans. Just as long as the communities haven't completed all of their assessments, you're going to receive them by the end of 2021. And if anybody has questions about that Livingston County NBRC money, email Nicole. I think everybody has Nicole's email. Probably everybody has Nicole's phone number, but I'm sure she would rather that you email her at this point. And Leicester has not formally joined. However, I know that the Trail Town process has been working with businesses located in Leicester and Cuylerville. All right. Oh yes, and back to the question about the bike rental stations again. Yes, and we'll get into the application requirements just after this. But one of the things that we're going to be looking for is what's the long-term sustainability? What's the plan for allowing something like this to, what's the implementation plan for something like this? And so, that would definitely be an expense that we'd be open to having the funding go towards, but we'd want to see how do you plan to administer a bike rental program using that funding. And I will remind everybody we'll have some more time for Q&A at the end. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, John, who's going to talk through the next couple of slides about the technical nuts and bolts process of using our application system. John?
Okay, thank you, Dylan. Yes, I'll go over the application process, which is going to be opening soon. It's the whole process is conducted online through our online application system, which is called Foundant. You can access Foundant by going to our website, www.ptny.org. And at the top, there is a button that says Grant Portal, the tab there at the top. You can click that. We encourage you to bookmark the page for easier access during the process. If you are accessing the grant portal by the website, please do not confuse that button with the login button that's to the right. That is for our organization's online system. We have confusion of that in the past, so be sure to click the grant portal button when you go to log in. And the next step is most likely you'll be creating a new account for, it's likely this is your first time, especially for the municipalities. Some of the nonprofits may have applied for our Park and Trail Partnership grants before. So check to see if you have. If you have and don't create a new one, you can log in with your existing account, or you can contact us for assistance, and we can get you set up with a new user profile under your already existing organization. So the information that we'll be seeking is the organization name, the employee identification number, your email address. You will first fill it out for the organization if you're a new organization, and then you'll be filling it out for you individually. And then most likely for either the executive director or the executive officer, in which case, if you are the executive officer, your information will automatically be included as that. The next is it will bring you to the applicant dashboard, and this is essentially your home page. If your organization has applied through us for anything before, or if all of the former applications will be available from this dashboard, it also lists your organizations and your executive director's information here. And to begin the application process, simply click on the apply button. So here you will be selecting the grant for which you are applying, and you'll click the corresponding blue apply button to the right-hand side. You'll see that there are other grants that we offer through Parks and Trails New York. Most likely there will not be an apply button there. Yours will be the only one that will have that blue apply button, so it should be pretty straightforward. Do take note that one of the options there's a button to the left side that says Send to Grant Hub. If you do not have Grant Hub, if you're not subscribed to them, don't worry about it. That's not essential. That's just an additional feature for in the Foundant software. So you do not have to be subscribed to Grant Hub, but it is helpful, I guess, for those who are. One of the very useful tools in the software is that you can print the application in full and share it with your colleagues. You can print it up as a PDF. Once you open the application, there will be a question list button to the right there that's circled, and it will print, easily printable. If you want to print the applications with the actual answers that you've been filling out over time, you'll click on a button that will appear next to that question list button. It will say Application Packet. That will print a whole PDF of all of the questions and the answers for which you've already entered into the system, but that button will not appear until you've actually started the application. And just some basic technical tips. Be sure to save your work as you go along. It will save, and you can log out and go back in and come back as many times as you need to. And the very important thing is when you are done with your application, we've had many who finish the application and they forget to click the Submit Application button at the bottom. And so we don't know if it's an abandoned application or if just forgot. So please make sure that you click that Submit Application button when all is completed. And yes, if you go to that website there's a lot more resources and technical tips that you can access.
All right, thank you, John. As I mentioned at the beginning, John is our grant coordinator. He administers the Park and Trail Partnership Grant, which, being a state-funded grant, is a lot more complicated than our grant. And so if you guys have questions about the technical aspect, I'm sure John's had to deal with it before. And so he and I would be happy to work together on getting those answered. he's familiar with how the founded system works, and so we'll be relying on him for some of those processes. So I'm going to go through the questions on the application. We are still finalizing exactly some of the wording and stuff. So it may not be 100% exactly phrased the same way, but it's basically finalized at this point. And I will give you a little bit of a word of caution that it may kind of sound like a lot as I'm going through it, but when you see it all laid out in one place, it's really not that much. We're not trying to overburden the communities, but we do, we have a responsibility with the funding that we've been awarded to make sure that we're giving it to projects that are fully thought out, that the funding is going to be appropriately spent. And we really want to give the Trailtown committees, the Trailtown communities, the opportunity to show us what you expect to achieve with the project. Also, I don't know if folks have been taking notes as they've been going. You don't need to. When the grant goes live, and you don't need to take notes on these questions as we go through. When the grant goes live at the beginning of January, you'll be able to download the full application, and it's not just going to include a question. Under each question will be a short sentence or two that provides some of the instruction on the grant questions. And those instructions are going to be almost identical to what I'm saying today. It's going to include a lot of the same information. All right, so what are the fields of the application going to be? Well, we've got a section on the basics, and this is just, short answers, but we need a name for the project. We want a 2-sentence summary that describes the project. We need to know the total project budget. What's the amount you're requesting, and then what's the organizational match going to be, which, as I mentioned, does need to be 15%. We want to know if there's any related projects that you've undertaken, that the applicant's undertaken, projects related to the Trailtown Initiative, projects related to Genesee Valley Greenway State Park, just any related projects we should know about. We want to see a summarized version of what is your vision for the Trailtown as it relates to the Greenway over the next 5 years. And then we want a timeline. What's a realistic and a detailed timeline for the project's implementation? So then those are the basics. Those will all be short answer. The centerpiece, really the bulk of the application, is going to be a narrative that describes the project in full. It'll be important to review the selection criteria. I'm going to discuss them in a few slides. They are up on the website, that GVG/grants website that I mentioned. To make sure that your narrative is speaking to those criteria. But the narrative should do the following. It should describe the project for which you're requesting the funds, should tell us what you ultimately wish to achieve with the project. It should explain why your group wants to undertake this specific project at this time, why this is the project you've chosen to apply for this year over any other project that you might have done. What is any background and history on the project? What your organization's involvement has been in planning for the project or in working towards coming up with this. How this project is going to enhance outdoor recreation and increase connectivity between Genesee Valley Greenway State Park and some of the neighboring communities. And how the project supports implementing the Genesee Valley Trailtown Initiative Action Plan for your community. And as I mentioned, Nicole is working on those with Michelle and with all of you, and those should be available to the committees and to the communities by the end of the year, so that you'll have them in hand once you go towards filling out the application. So next slide. We are going to ask for some supporting information as well. We'll need to know who the key staff and volunteers are, who are going to be the people that are actually carrying out the work that's outlined in the grant application. We'll want to know as well who you're going to work with to undertake the project. If there's partnerships that are involved, and what's the role of the partnerships. We'll want to know about community support. Is there support for the project within the surrounding community? If it's going to be a nonprofit applicant, we'll ask for a letter of support or a description of support for the project from the municipality in which the project is located. And as I mentioned before, for projects that take place in the Greenway itself, those need to be communicated with Christine Uribe at Genesee Valley Greenway State Park. We'll need Christine's approval for those applications, and we'll work with Christine on what's the best process for doing that. But generally, I would assume it'll be a letter from Christine or an email from Christine included in the application packet. For other projects that involve any installation of physical infrastructure, if it's on other property, we'll need a letter from the property owner agreeing to that that's going to be something that they're okay with having happen. That being said, if it's a municipality that's going to install something on its own land, we don't need a letter that also says that's okay. You know, the municipality applying gives tacit approval to that. I also want to touch on support letters. Support letters are an important part of any grant application. It's a way to demonstrate support for the project within the broader community. We are going to be accepting support letters from local elected officials, community leaders, really anybody that you think would help make the case as to why we should fund your project. You know, they're encouraged, they're not required. If it's public officials, other agencies, nonprofits, maybe businesses in your community, really going out and kind of making sure that you're able to demonstrate through these letters what the support is for this project. Again, as I mentioned, though, for the nonprofit applicants, we will require a letter of support from the municipality in which the project's located. The letters have to be received to us by March 15th. I will ask that you send them all as one as part of your application. I don't want to have to sort through 85 different emails that some are from one community, some are from another, and try to piece together which, which letter goes with which application. They should be received all at once. They can be uploaded into the Founded system, as I mentioned, or they can be sent via email to the GVG@ptny.org email address, again, by March 15th. If you do only have hard copies available, you can mail them to us. Feel free to reach out to me for our mailing address, but I much prefer having them digitally. Another question that we ask as part of the supporting information is partial funding. You know, as I mentioned, there's 50,000 to be given out. There's 10 trail town communities, and we have a maximum of 15,000. So we can't give the max to all 10 communities. So if we're trying to decide and we're able to only award partial funding for some projects, we'd rather be able to partially fund your project than not be able to fund it at all. And so we want you to tell us, if the project can only receive partial funding, what elements would be the most important to fund? You know, what could be you know, a smaller piece of the project that would still function. And then we also want to have you share with us any planning documents from the community that include the project you're applying for, or that outline a vision for development around or related to Genesee Valley Greenway State Park. Obviously, you'll have the action plans as well, but I know that there has been a lot of good planning work done in a lot of the communities. And so just sharing that with us would be helpful. And so the next slide is another kind of significant piece, and that's the budget. You know, we're going to want to see a detailed budget for the project, and we do have a worksheet that you'll be able to use. That's actually live on you know, it's available to download from our website currently. I did need to make an update to it, so let me make sure it's the most up-to-date version. I'll do that this afternoon, but that'll be up on our website. And the budget should include information on where the match is going to come from. And as I mentioned a couple of times, it's 15% of the total project budget. And along with its status, do you already, if it's going to be a cash match, do you already have it? Is it pledged? Do you plan on raising it? You know, obviously for a lot of this, we are expecting a number of the funding to be, a lot of the matches to be of in-kind donation, but we definitely are welcoming of cash or other funding matches. So, you know, this workshop or worksheet is a chance to lay that all out there. I will mention that for municipalities that intend to match the grant with operating funds, you know, we do request that there's a letter from the supervisor or mayor written on letterhead or a signed dated village or town board resolution that states the board's intent to use operating funds as a match for this grant. For nonprofits that intend to match the grant with operating funds, we would need a similar letter, a letter from the executive director or the board president stating that funding from the nonprofit is going to be used as a match for this grant. We do have a match calculator on our website as well. It's a simple spreadsheet that just helps you determine for the amount you're applying for, how much of a match will you need, or if you know the total cost of the project, how much can you apply for and how much would need to be to serve as the match. And so our template budget worksheet, it serves two purposes. Obviously, it's to It's a template that you should use and submit to us. I want to see the budgets for all of the grant applications coming in looking like this, because it'll make it a lot easier for us to understand the components of your project. So download it. It also, this is an example. It comes pre-filled out with example information. They're just suggested items. So if you use the template, I encourage you to update it accordingly. You know, the different items that are listed under expenses, the different sources of funding, those you should, you know, change that all to reflect the circumstances within your specific community. And make sure that your match is correct. That's going to be something that we're looking for. I will caution you all that my background is as a budget analyst, and so I'm going to be looking very closely at the budgets to make sure that they all add up right. So next, looking at the project outcomes. This is going to be the kind of last piece of the application. We're going to want to see the audience served. One thing that we're interested in seeing is, how will this project engage a wide demographic, welcome communities and individuals from different backgrounds and abilities? Is it going to enhance or promote diversity, equity, and inclusion at all? And this is going to be challenging for some proposals, I know. We have a link in the application that's got a list of resources. It'll help you guide, it'll help guide you with incorporating some of these themes into your project. And we have a link to that on our website. It's up on our website currently. It's on the additional resources page of that GVG Grants website. We're going to be looking at results and evaluation. You know, what key deliverables, what quantifiable changes do you expect to result from this project? How is your organization, how's the Trail Town going to measure these changes? How are you going to evaluate if the project is a success or not? And then, as I mentioned before, the long-term sustainability. How do you expect to sustain this project and its results after the funding ends? If it's a building project, what's the maintenance plan for it? Who's going to look after it? If it's a program, how do you expect to continue it after the funding ends? What might it look like 5 years from now? And obviously these are smaller grant amounts, so the projects are smaller, but we just want to see that it's something that you're thinking about, that it's something that's part of the thought process as you're going through applying for this. And then last, publicity, you know, and we're happy to work with you on that, but you know, as you work on the project, as you know, work towards completion and get the results, you know, what activities, what communication channels do you expect to use to just make it known to potential users, to visitors, that the project is there, that it's something that'll be a resource, and that you've done this work as a Trail Town community. So next, I mentioned this before, selection criteria. Now, we've got a number of criteria, and these are all going to be things that are kind of feed into our thinking as we go through. You know, consistency with the action plans, as I mentioned, having the budget be detailed and documented and realistic. You know, those goals, those outcomes, those measures of success, are they clearly articulated and well-defined? Is there an organizational commitment to the project? Is there support from the broader community? I'm not going to read through all of these. It's all up on our website, actually currently on that ptny.org/GVG/grants. But you know, really looking at things like, is it taking advantage of the proximity of the greenway and of the community to trails and greenways, and scenic corridors, and some of the other natural, cultural, historical, recreational resources you have in your community? Does it enhance the greenway? Does it contribute to the Genesee Valley Greenway State Park visitor experience? So yeah, you know, these are all the different criteria that we'll be looking at as we go through the process. You know, the plan for sustaining the work under the grant beyond what the funding requested will cover. So that's the entirety of the application. As I mentioned at the outset, it does seem like a lot here, but once you get into it, it's really not that much. And so just a few things to keep in mind. We do have some limits on file uploads in our system. There's a 1 to 2 megabyte limit per question. As you go through to upload attachments to the questions, it only allows 1 attachment per source. So we ask that you combine, if it's a multiple pages or a couple of different pages from different sources, combine it into one file to upload it, or email it to gvg@ptny.org. Just make sure that it's clearly marked, and I'll actually send out a subject line format that we ask that all the grants use to help us keep all of those those components of the grants ordered and organized and everything. As John mentioned, download the form ahead of time so that you've got it, that it's a PDF, that you don't need to get into the system every time you want to look at a question. You are able to save your work though and come back to it. So make sure you save your work as you go. The worst thing would be, of course, to put in a lot of work on an application and then lose it. If you have any questions about using the system, going through it, feel free to reach out to us. We'd rather, again, there's a lot of things we're looking for, but we're also here to help you with this. So this is part of technical assistance and part of the capacity building aspect of the Trail Town process, is making sure that you're not only able to apply for our grants, but then you're able to turn around and apply for more and bigger and better grants going forward. Before you submit the application, make sure you've answered all the questions, that you're very clear about your answers, that you're as detailed as you can be. And once again, to echo John, don't forget to click submit application. You have to click submit application by midnight on Monday, February 28th, 2022. That's the deadline for our grants. And we're going to put a bunch of additional resources up on the website at ptny.org/GVG/grants. In fact, all of those resources, we're not going to put them up. They're already up there. I put them up yesterday. So those resources should all be available to you currently. And we'll be going along and updating the website as we have more information available on the grant as we finalize things. And again, you'll be able to use that website or just the ptny.org website to log in when the grant goes live on January 7th. So next slide, just looking at what the next steps are. So determine who your applicant's going to be, confirm that they're eligible. Create that login at ptny.org using the grant portal that John mentioned. You can create the login before January 7th, but you won't be able to start the application until that date. Identify and secure your matching funds. The 15% match, as I mentioned, can all be in kind, but it does need to be quantifiable. Or we are willing to use cash match or other sources of matching funds. If you have any questions, contact me, gvg@ptny.org. That's the best place to send questions about the grant. And again, the application is due February 28th. Make sure you have the full application in by that date. And we look forward to being able to see what some of these great projects that you guys are going to submit are. I mean, there's already some great ideas from the Q&A. I can see you guys have your creative processes flowing. And, we're looking forward to both reading the applications, determining who we're going to award, and then helping see these projects come to fruition. So thank you, everybody. We're going to turn it to some questions. First, I just want to note that Christine has put her office phone and her email in the chat. Anybody that needs OPRHP support, she has asked that you reach out to her as soon as possible. I think we all know how busy Christine is to oversee a 100-mile long state park. So making sure that you can do that as soon as possible would be helpful. We do have a question in the chat. Are the selection criteria weighted or prioritized? We haven't determined exactly what those are yet. We're going to go through and do that over the coming days. I think overall we want to see how the different pieces of it fit together as a coherent narrative. It's not that we don't necessarily have a scoring rubric or something like that that's set up at this point. Yeah. Any other questions? You can submit them in the Q&A function now. There's also a raise hand button function if anybody would like to ask questions live. We'll be willing to call on some folks. And if you are like me and your questions always come to you right after you get off the call, send me an email. We're going to be, as I mentioned, we're going to be compiling all of the questions that we receive into a Q&A document that will be available on our website, and that we'll be, sharing out, to those who request it. We also will be sending out a reminder that the grant application opens on January 7th. We'll be sending that out, shortly before it opens, in that first week of January. All right, I'm going to give another couple of seconds for questions, but they haven't been flying in. I know I've kind of thrown a lot at you. As I did mention at the beginning, this webinar has been recorded, so this is all going to be posted on our website as a video. If you're so inclined to watch it again, or if you're more likely, if you have somebody else from your committee or your community that you want to share it with, you can feel free to direct them to it. It'll take us a couple of days to get it, cleaned up and uploaded and everything, but we'll have it up on our website as soon as we can. Yeah, and so if there's no other questions, I think we're just about ready to wrap it up. Again, thanks everybody for taking the time to join us for the webinar today. I hope it's been informative and helpful for you. And again, I hope that you're all looking forward to what you'll be able to do with the funding that we're looking forward to awarding through this grant.